On fire today, boys. So with this one, this is called the hybrid generation, when traditional values codified with collide with player culture. Right. In Black culture, there have been there's two social hierarchies. Right. One social hierarchy is the player Mac and pimp culture, and then there's the traditional male black male culture, social of the social hierarchy. These two social hierarchies are part of the are outside of Black culture too, but we're talking specifically to Black culture, right? Now, what happened? I got to go through the brief history of it from my observation. When you watch that movie Dead Presidents, right, with Connie the Pimp, what happened when the brother went to go fight in the Vietnam War? What was left over to define what Black masculinity was the pimp, player, and Mac archetypes, right? Because most of the traditional men during the 60s went to go, or Black men went to go fight in the Vietnam War, and they came back fucked up, right? So, this is where I'm getting this from, right? And a lot of times when you watch, for my 33 years of living, you always hear, the player Mac culture. And, this is how you get this with this one from a player's point of view. Then when a traditional male point of view say something, the player Mac call that nigga square, lame, or sucker. You understand? And the reason being is because a lot of Black culture has been dominated by the player Mac lifestyle. So a lot of kids grew up watching their mothers be more respectful to the player Mac and pimp, but disrespect the traditional man, Black male. And the reason being is because a lot of what happened during, from the 60s, going up to the 80s and the 90s with the Bill Clinton NAFTA agreement, it took away a lot of the Black man's ability to now protect and provide for the household. So Black men didn't have the influence to be traditional because you didn't have the core component to being a traditional man, which is the financial capability, right? And you have NAFTA taking away a lot of the manufacturing jobs. And I think, you know what? I'm actually going to do that. Let me do that in this. Okay, so hopefully I can find it. Not that. Hold on, give me a moment. I gotta go find the specific place where I put it. Um, it's probably maybe it's this. Give me a moment, because in a lot of the things I put together the reasons why certain things happen. So I watch history to track what happened. Um, because a lot of things happened that took away the Black male, one of the core components to being a traditional male to Black men. Yeah, Black women acknowledge it. They know it exists, but they don't give a shit. Um, let me see if it's in this. It's in this. It's a little bit in this, but I don't go into depth on it on that one. So let me show you what I'm talking about. And I'm going to do a full video on this right here. and how the Victorian era created a transactional patriarchy. So this, right? What happened to black men? Right, so this is what it is, right? So this is part of it, right? Both Victorian and modern men are trapped in external validation loops, status, money, protection, provision. This leaves no room for sovereign masculine autonomy, which should drive from inner authority and principle, not material success, right? So, so this is what I mean. See, I put a lot of good stuff in this. Right? The Industrial Revolution changed the masculine contract. When industrialization took off, the definition of masculine shifted from physical protection and land ownership to economic production and industrial discipline. Manhood became tied to the machine, not the sword. So for a time, that was still sustainable. Manufacturing, infrastructure, and heavy industry still depend on male labor and endurance. Even though the mid 20th century has noted, a man with a high school diploma could earn enough to support a family. But the pivot came when industrial labor gave way to corporate labor, right? So this is part of it. Um, this doesn't give the full scope of what I mean. But I'm talking about what happened to black men. I might have to go into this branch. Give me a second. What I'm pulling up is very important to today. That's why I'm going to the links to get the extra stuff in it to give you. No, it's not that. Sorry. No, it's not that. Shit. Can't find it. Ah. All this took place in the Bill Clinton era, right? So I'm showing you what took away the core component to being traditional, right? To having a traditional influence in your household. Ah, there it is. NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. Clinton signed NAFTA to eliminate tariffs between U.S., Mexico, Canada, intending to do that. So effects on family and labor, massive layoffs in the industrial Midwest and South, disproportionately affected black men and working class men. Job loss, economic instability, higher rates of stress, and family breakdown. Communities dependent on factory labor saw increase in single-parent households due to financial pressure. Long-term consequences, disrupted the male breadwinner model and working class. Families contributing indirectly to family instability, right? So that's basically what took away between the Vietnam War, 70s, 80s, going up into the 90s and 2000s. There were a lot of things that were put in play that took away black men's, most men in America, but especially black men, ability to be the breadwinner in the house, which is a core component to being traditional, right? So, after that, what took over was the player pimp lifestyle. And we're going to go into it, right? The social hierarchy of men. The traditional hierarchy, builders and protectors. The pimp player hierarchy, manipulators and controllers, right? The social hierarchy of men. The traditional male hierarchy, rooted in the Victorian era ideas of duty, family, honor, and discipline, influenced by older patriarchal models found in ancient civilizations, where man's worth was tied to his ability to build, protect, provide, and lead. Core values, legacy over lust. His goal was legacy, lineage, and structure. Discipline over indulgence, his power and self-control. Hierarchy and order. He believes in the chain of command. God, man, woman, and child. Reciprocity. A good woman is chaste, nurturing, supportive, and obedient because she's investing in his leadership. Moral framework. He sees sexuality as sacred and guarded, not transactional or recreational. So now if you're a traditional male, You're not supposed to be secured with being with a non-traditional woman or a whore. You're not supposed to be secure with that because that's not part of your social makeup. That's not part of your identity. That's not part of what you stand for, your principles you believe in. All right. Respect is earned through honor, provision, and integrity. He values stable women who build family, not chaos. He believes civilization collapses when women become unrestrained and men stop leading, right? So let me read that properly. He believes civilizations collapse when women become unrestrained and men stop leading. His archetype, the builder, the patriarch, the protector. Examples, Marcus Garvey, Frederick Douglass, George Washington, Carver, Mansa Musa, or even your modern disciplined husband, father figure, right? The pimp player archetype, emerging from street culture and post-industrial rebellion. This hierarchy redefines male power through sexual access, manipulation, and influence, rather than family and order. It's a shadow version of masculinity, one that thrives on controlling chaos rather than bringing peace. Core values, power through persuasion, the gift of gab, charm, and manipulation. Access over legacy. Values measured by how you can attract, not how much you can build, right? Freedom from responsibility. No duty, no discipline, do what you feel. Rebellion as strength. Rejecting traditional systems as square or weak. Emotional detachment. Women are not partners, they're resources or pawns in the game, right? So this is what their hierarchy. So if you're a player, Mac or pimp, you're supposed to be secure with dating a 304 or a whore because that's the type of woman for you, built for your kind of leadership or whatever, right? Respect is earned through dominance, charisma, and control. He values chaotic women who respond to excitement, attention, and validation. He views traditional men as insecure soft because they require boundaries. His archetype, the pimp, the hustler, the player. Examples, Iceberg Slim, certain rappers, charismatic ladies, men, or modern influencers who preach sexual abundance and non-commitment, which is what I see a lot in, I'm gonna say it, a lot of this is in the manosphere space, and a lot of this is in the red pill space. Right? You have a lot of mixed social hierarchies going on there. And in the player and game culture too, right? In the player and game culture and with the dating cultures, they have a lot of that mixed over there too, right? The in-between, hybrid males, this is the main part, main dish, right? Modern men sit in the gray area. They want the discipline of the traditional with the freedom of the player. This is how most men, including myself, are, right? These men often preach balance, financial discipline, leadership, but also sexual autonomy. That might be cool to the traditionalists or reform players trying to bridge both worlds, right? Why this matters? The distinction helps. Men identify which hierarchy they're following and what outcomes the system naturally produce. Women understand which type of men they're dealing with, the one who wants to build with them and the ones who wants to play, who plays with them. Communities recognize how conflicting male archetypes shape social media spaces, dating dynamics, and even the image of manhood itself. Which is because you got the player max or the game culture niggas or dating coach niggas. They define masculinity under one umbrella of social hierarchy. Then you got the traditional niggas, right, that define masculinity under the traditional hierarchy, right? So these are two hierarchies you see on the internet colliding with each other and shit. The social hierarchy of men, the house of tradition versus the street of freedom. The house represents the foundation of civilization. These are the men who built infrastructure, families, laws, and legacy. They constructed so this is the house of the traditional men, right? They constructed the moral, economic, and social framework that allowed America and most stable societies to exist. The code is built on discipline, duty, and legacy. They work, sacrifice, and build. Order and accountability mean lead, women follow, both have defined roles. Moral leadership, sex, marriage, and family have purpose. Boundaries and standards, not all women are the same. The wife and the 304s are treated differently by design. Now, this is how the traditional men house. So I got to say this to the game, mag, player, and pimp niggas. If this is how the men have built America, and this is how they define themselves and how they define their women, who the fuck are you to tell them they're insecure for how they want to run their house that you live in and benefit from? In this house, traditional men rule their home and set the standards for how their women operate. This isn't oppression, it's structure. The man builds the house, so he sets the rules within it. That goes for the men too who want to be player Mac and pimping. You don't like the house, you can go to France. France do a lot of freaky sex shit in Germany, right? The street of the player and the pimp. The pimp-player hierarchy represents the street, not as an insult, but as a different social world. It's that marketplace of charisma, control, and freedom. These men thrive in an ecosystem where women's sexuality is active, open, and monetized. That's fine as long as it stays in that world. Their code is built on freedom, not family, influence, not infrastructure, seduction, not stewardship, access, not accountability. In their world, one's value is attention, excitement, and exchange. The 304, the OnlyFans model, the dancer, she fits their ecosystem. There's no sin in that if it stays in that world, right? Because this is what traditional niggas got to understand. You need certain things in your ecosystem to neutralize other stuff, right? It's like you have a farm, right? And you have mice in the field. What would you get? You get like a cat or a dog that, keep those kind of pests out of the garden and shit, right? The conflict. When the street invades the house, here's where the issues lies. And my critique hits the bullseye. The problem isn't the existence of the pimp-player hierarchy. The problem begins when that hierarchy disrespects the traditional one. When the player leaves his street and walks into another man's house, telling that man how to run it, that's disorder. That's the serpent wisdom. That's the serpent whispering in Eve's ear. If you don't want to live under traditional rules, build your own house. But don't step into another man's house and try to rewrite his code. That's what Eve tried to do, what the serpent tried to do with God. He tried to rewrite how the garden was to be operated, right? But you can't tell God he's insecure for how he's running his garden. You have to respect God and his rules. All right, now, like I said before, the idea of a woman being the reflection of a man is surface level. This is what I mean. See, Adam and Eve were the reflection of God so long as they followed God's instruction and didn't bite that apple. Once they bit that apple, which means they had their own autonomy and agency, they no longer became the reflection of God. They became the reflection of their own autonomy. Now, what God would have failed at is if he allowed them to be in the garden, tolerating their disrespect. That's when it would have became God's fault. But because God stood on business and they broke a rule and he kicked them out of his garden, it's not God's fault. It's Adam and Eve's fault for being disobedient, right? So that's what I mean in that. That's why when you say the reflection of a man, the woman is a reflection of a man. The woman is only the reflection of the man so long as she's following his influence. She's following what he tells her to do. Once she no longer follows his influence and she falls out of line with that, she's no longer the reflection of him. Now it becomes his fault when he tolerates her disrespect and her disobedience. Then it becomes a reflection of him because he's not standing on what he say, right? What he says about how he wants to rule, right? So now this is the next level to it, fellas. This is where you hold yourself accountable, right? If you tell this woman, I want to meet you here at this time, dressed like this, right? Like that. Like say you want to go to Starbucks at this time wearing this. If you don't show up at that time and this woman shows up there before you and you show up late, then it's your fault because you're not standing on the business of what you say. So it's not really about her. It's about what you say you're going to do and not doing it. And then she follows what you say you're going to do, and you don't meet the structure of your words. That's when it becomes your fault because it's based upon you, right? So a lot of, especially black men, y'all got to break the cycle of everything that black women do is the reflection of you or it's your fault. No, it's not. Especially if they're not in alignment with where you want to go or your direction. And that bullshit that black men don't want to know where they want to go, that's bullshit. Majority of black men and black culture know exactly what they want to do with their lives and go. The only problem is that they get caught up trying to appease black women because they're still trapped in the old Victorian age model where everything the woman did was a reflection of you. The only difference is that in the Victorian model, the women were also held accountable to the expectations of what the men wanted. Now they're not. So you can't apply those same rules in a different environment, right? Because the traditional houses were built civilization, literally and morally. The play economy only exists because the traditional house created stability in which it could thrive. Without that foundation, the streets crumble too. So this is what the player Max got to understand. If the order of the house that the traditional men built was monogamy, traditional relationships, if that shit crumbled into open and non-monogamy, it's going to be like the same situation with Rome and all the civilizations. It's going to crumble. And you're not going to be able to do what you do. The agenda of the modern player economy. What's happening today is that many modern players or game cultures have started undermining the traditional masculine order by shaming traditional men for valuing chastity and modesty. And the reason why they're doing it now is because now, when traditional men put an expectation on the women, a standard for them to follow, now it creates it takes away that buffet of the box economy or the sex economy. Now you have women that say, shit, if I do this, I won't get access to this type of man. So let me adjust myself to that type of man. So that what that does now, when you have the players on this side and the traditional men on that side, it creates a balance now. Because you have women that can be traditional and they have a man that can accommodate them. Then you have the women who are non-traditional, but they have a player on the mat that can accommodate them. The problem with it now is a lot of you playing game niggas, y'all got accustomed to the free box economy that's going on there in black culture, right? Because black men, because of what happened during NAFTA in the 80s and the 90s, that took away their influence, that breadwinner influence now. And that's been the imbalance. The player Mac economy has been dominating the direction of where the women are going. So now when you have Kevin Samuels coming there now and the Angry Mans that's coming there now, and they're giving you a traditional standard, it's now pulling the pendulum back. And I'm sorry to say, a lot of you player Mac niggas, I think you fear that you're going to lose your economy. Because if you weren't, you wouldn't shame traditional men in their own house for what they value. Right? Just like you wouldn't shame another player for how he wants to operate. Why do you shame another man for how he wants to operate in his own house? Right? Promoting promiscuous women as liberated while mocking wives is boring. Encouraging traditional men to lower their standards so the 3 or 4 economy stays profitable. Benefiting from the structure traditional men built while turning down the code that sustains it. This isn't masculine freedom anymore. It's feminized rebellion disguised as manhood. That's what it is, because a lot of the tactics that you play game niggas use, a lot of feminism use. All right? I could get pissed off at me all you want. The code of respect. A real man will a traditional player lives by the masculine code of respect. You don't tell another man how to run his house if you didn't build it. If a man chooses the traditional path, he has a right to. Hold his woman to traditional standards. Expect modesty, loyalty, and obedience within his home. Build legacy instead of lust. That's his jurisdiction. Just as the player has his lane, the traditional man has his domain. Because remember, traditional men, players, you might have a lane, but the lane you're in is part of the traditional man's domain. It's his domain, which means it's like God, right? It's like Xenos in Dragon Ball Z. He can erase a planet if he wanted to. So that's what that is. You got to respect the men and their house. Bruh, serious business. It's like if you go to Saudi Arabia, you respect Saudi Arabia. This is my thing about black men, right, in black culture. If they go to Saudi Arabia or if they go to Japan or any of those cultures, they know to respect the rules of those houses. But when it comes to black men and black men, we don't know how to respect each other. Final line, builders versus borrowers. At the end of the day, traditional men built families, communities, and nations. Players and pimps borrow from the social stability others created. The danger isn't the player's existence, it's when he becomes the serpent in the garden, whispering rebellion into the house of order and turning Eve against Adam for his own benefit. Because that's what you players are. The social hierarchy of men, order, ecosystem, and separation of lines. So this is where I come with the balance and why certain things are necessary. Natural order of hierarchies. In a balanced society, not every man is meant to be a husband, and not every woman is meant to be a wife. Just like not every man can be a leader, not every woman is fit to follow. That's not disrespect, that's design. There are different lanes in the male hierarchy. Each serves a social function. The problem only begins when those lanes cross. It's like a CEO trying to be a CFO, or a CFO trying to be a CEO. Right? The role of the traditional man. The traditional man represents structure, discipline, and lineage. He's the foundation of civilization, the builder of homes, laws, families, and legacy. His woman reflects that. Modest, disciplined, and family-minded, built for structure, not chaos. Her purpose is not entertainment, it's continuity. She lives under a covenant, not a contract. The traditional hierarchy produces stability, the moral, economic, and cultural base that keeps society standing. The role of the player, pimp, or mag. Now, the player pimp archetype serves a different but necessary role in that ecosystem. He exists to manage and engage with women who cannot or will not live under traditional discipline. These are women who value freedom over submission, choose attention over legacy, prioritize lifestyle, aesthetics, or sexuality over structure. And that's fine so long as they stay in that lane. Because when a player pimp manages that type of woman, he's given her a lane of expression without corrupting the traditional house. A male counterpart who can deal with her energy and lifestyle, a space of belonging that keeps her from disrupting the traditional ecosystem. In other words, the player is the manager of the chaos so that order can remain sacred. That's his functional role in the masculine ecosystem. The importance of lane separation. When everyone stays in their lane, society remains balanced. Traditional men build, traditional women support. Players entertain, 304s perform. Each part has its own moral gravity. The problem begins when house lines blur. When a 304 starts demanding the reward of a wife, or when a player starts mocking the order of a traditional house, the system falls into confusion, like we are in today, and now, right? The modern crisis, lane of confusion. Today's chaos comes from players crossing into traditional lanes, mocking traditional standards as insecure. 304s trying to infiltrate the wife lane, demanding wife treatment without wife discipline. Traditional men being shamed for maintaining the standards that built civilization. That confusion destroys both hierarchies. The player economy loses authenticity because it feeds off of rebellion, not structure. The traditional order loses respect because its boundaries are under attack. The solution and restoration of hierarchical respect. To restore balance, players must respect the house they didn't build. The lane exists because traditional men built a world stable enough for game to thrive in. Without the house, there is no street. Traditional men must guard their house. They must reestablish masculine jurisdiction and hold firm boundaries on what belongs in their domain. Women must know which lane they belong to. The lady belongs to traditional hierarchy. The 304 belongs to player pimp hierarchy. Crossing lanes cause disorder and deception. I'm going to read that again. The lady belongs to the traditional hierarchy. The 304 belongs to the player pimp hierarchy. Crossing lanes cause disorder and deception. Now, what keeps these in their lanes? When the traditional nigga or man says, I want a lady that, and this lady fits this, that, and the third. If you're 304, you can't get access to traditional male. Or when you traditional niggas out there start simping, like paying for a 304's date, or taking her to Root Chris, or texting her 10,000 times for the day. Tricking. Now, a lot of you traditional niggas have fallen out of your place and started tricking. You know what I'm saying? And I got to do a separate video defining what being a trick is, because I think from what I've heard from everybody, none of y'all know what the fuck trick is. Because y'all call a nigga, you call a dude that's taking a chick out that he likes, that she likes him too, on a simple date to like Golden Crust or to an ice cream shop. Y'all call that tricking. When he's just taking on, it's two people that like each other. You know what I'm saying? And then suppose she gives him box at the end of that. He's still a trick after that? He just took her to get some ice cream because that's what he liked doing. This chick he knows likes him. He invites this chick that he knows like him and he liked her to some ice cream because that's what he wanted to do. And what if he didn't get the box? What if she wanted to give him the box, but he didn't want the box? What's the definition of trick? I don't think anybody knows what the fuck it means. And I'm confused at this point, right? Men must stop recruiting from another man's lane. The player shouldn't try to convert the traditional woman. The traditional man shouldn't try to reform the 304. Each lane polices itself. The closer principle. Order is masculine. When you remove order, you remove masculinity. When you remove separation, you remove purpose. And when every man tries to rule every domain, chaos replaces hierarchy. The true measure of a man's power is not how many lanes he controls, but in how faithful he guards the lane he was built to rule. Now, this is the part. I fit into the hybrid generation, the accidental fusion of two worlds. And I think, like I said, this happened during the millennial generation. I want to say from the 90s and up, the 90s and after or down, or 90s and down, like 90s going into Gen Z. I think this happened with our generation, right? Because I'm 33 years old. And I think, us listening to a lot of the player niggas and then the traditional niggas. And then we taking what's working from both worlds and applying it. The women too, right? Because the women, there's women that cook clean, want to be traditional, but they got to market themselves like they're 3 or 4. Because a lot of us dudes, we had to market ourselves, even though we're traditional, we had to lose a lot of the game from the players to find the proper women. So, like, we're the hybrid generation, right? The collision that created a new type. When the traditional hierarchy, builder, protectors, and family men, and the player hierarchy, pimps, hustlers, and controllers, collided through media, social exchange, and cultural confusion, a new type of man and woman emerged, the hybrid. This is where you hear a lot of players will say, we talk a lot of traditional shit, right? Because they're a hybrid of the two, because of cultural exchange and socialism and being socialized and talking to each other and sharing game and stuff, right? This is not, remember, the traditional nigga has game too, like the player has game. It's just that the traditional nigga game is building, protecting family men, right? So, they have game too, right? That was not by design, that was by exposure. Traditional men began absorbing player values because dominance, game, and charisma became cultural currency. Traditional men and women began absorbing 3 or 4 traits because sexual freedom, attention, and validation became cultural currency. The world didn't move by principle anymore. It moved by influence. The hybrid male. The hybrid man is the result of men raised under traditional values but shaped by a modern hypersexual culture. He's part protector, part player. He believes in structure but also enjoys indulgence. He values loyalty but struggles with abundance. He has discipline but he flirts with temptation, right? His traits, charisma of the player, but conscious of a patriarch. Understands women emotionally but still wants order and respect. Believes in family but fears being played. Tries to balance freedom with responsibility. He's not a bad man, he's a conflicted man. He's trying to be traditional in a world that rewards rebellion, right? This is how most of us are, right? Most men in my generation on down or up, whatever you want to call it. From millennials going through Gen Z and whatever the next generation is after that. The hybrid woman is the mirror of that same confusion. She values stability and love, but she's been trained to market herself. She desires safety of her home, but also the thrill of validation. She dresses like a 3 or 4, but prays for a husband. Sounds familiar? She talks like she's independent, but feels empty without direction. And I can see it based upon a lot of the women that you see on panels, you see doing TikTok reviews, a lot of the women who become OnlyFans models and regret that decision, right? Because that was something that was never meant for them. You know what I'm saying? So now they become a hybrid of both those worlds, right? So I can see that in women, because I could tell between the two extremes, the women who are hoes, the women who are traditional, and then the women who are balanced and in between. Same thing with the dudes, right? Her traits, the loyalty of a wife, but the social habits of the street. The nurturing of a mother, but the marketing of an influencer. She wants a man to lead, but fears submission. She craves order, but confuses it with control, like you're controlling or toxic, right? She's not immoral, she's misguided. She's trying to build a family in a world that glorifies attention. The cultural accident. This hybridization didn't happen through conscious design. It happened through cultural confusion. The media glorified player values as masculine power. Feminism and consumerism glorify sexual liberation as female empowerment. Technology collapsed private life and public life, making image more powerful than substance. Social media created constant comparison, turning authenticity into performance. So both sides unconsciously began copying each other's traits because both sides were trying to survive a cultural identity crisis. This is the benefit of both those bridges, right? I gotta be balanced and I gotta be honest, because when you gotta see the benefit to both worlds, because both those worlds are here now. Right? So you got to use the game from both to navigate the world we're in right now, right? Even though the hybrid generation was born from confusion, it might also bridge that this might be also be the bridge that reconnects the old world and the new world. Here's how. The hybrid man has the heart of a traditionalist, but communication skills of a player. He can reach both worlds. The hybrid woman has the nurturing of a wife, but the social influence of a modern woman. She can model balance between freedom and devotion. If refined properly, this hybrid lane could be the middle kingdom, a space where masculine discipline and modern flexibility coexist. But it only works if the hybrid learns who he is, which is what I call the sovereign the sovereign identity. Without a sovereign compass, the hybrid becomes lost, constantly pulled between two worlds that can't coexist in their pure form. The sovereign man or woman must know which code he lives by, choose which values are his, not borrowed from social media. Understand the difference between adapting and abandoning. Lead himself before he leads others. Because the world will always have noise, trends, and contradictions, like with the player man game culture and the traditional niggas. Both sides contradict each other, and even within those sides, they have contradictions of themselves, right? Because the world will always have noise, trends, and contradictions. But sovereignty gives a direction when the map is unclear. A sovereign man doesn't reject his culture, he orders it. He takes what serves purpose and disregards what weakens him. Cooking with Kaya. Just a thought. Cooking with Kaya, she's a hybrid that leans more towards the whores, right? The 3 or 4s, but she's more of a hybrid because she's a whore or 3 or 4, but she does traditional shit. She cooks and cleans. You know what I'm saying? That's why a lot of guys was excited with Cooking with Kaya, not because she was twerking or whatever, but because she was cooking and cleaning, which a lot of those modern women that a lot of those men were dating or in relationships were doing. They weren't cooking and cleaning like Cooking with Kaya. They were ordering DoorDash or cooking some bullshit meal. So we're now in the age of recalibration. The old archetypes have collided, and the new hybrids are forming the next chapter of masculinity and femininity. This is not about going back, it's about realignment. Taking the best of both worlds, the discipline of tradition, the confidence of a player, the rareness of modern, and the rootedness of the ancient. If we can recalibrate this generation, we can rebuild culture, not as imitators of the past, but as refined carriers of its principles. So that's that, right? I built that to so we can identify the men on YouTube, who's saying what they represent, what's the social hierarchy, so you know who's who and what they're talking. So now if you're a male, you're a female, and you're trying to figure out about dating, you know who to listen to. You know if you're going to listen to both people, you know what to throw away and what to keep. So that's why I put that there. Right. Anyway, this is Kid Shorty Gable Nation. Like, share, and subscribe.